Well, joining me now on our political panel, Labor MP Stephen Jones and Liberal MP Tony Smith. Thanks very much for your company today.
Good to be with you, David. Good to be here.
I want to ask first about the news poll, and to you, Tony Smith, in caucus today. As you heard, Julia Gillard said that she mentioned the vicious attacks on Craig Thomson last week. Now, this news poll was taken following a week of attacks on Craig Thomson. Was that a misguided strategy?
No, we held the government and Craig Thomson to account. The Fair Work Australia report was released. The Prime Minister had questions to answer. We had a duty to pursue it. Now, look, there's a news poll out today. There was an essential poll out yesterday. I saw on Sky. I mean, if Labor members want to commentate on individual polls, that's their business. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time focusing on individual polls. We just focus on the job at hand. But if they want to look for explanations, I mean, maybe an explanation is that Julia Gillard was out of the country. Maybe that's an explanation.
Stephen Jones, it's hardly cause for real celebration here on the current news poll figures. Labor would be annihilated, but is this enough to put the leadership matter to rest?
Well, look, I've got to disagree with Smithy here. I think what this poll says is what people are coming up to me in the electorate and telling me, will you guys stop talking about that? Let the courts do their job. We want you to focus on the big issues that matter to us, the economic issues about creating jobs and opportunities in our electorates. Stop banging on about that other stuff. A court will determine that in due course. And I think that's reflected in the polls, and it's certainly what's motivating me.
Are there any other matters that you think may have played into this? For example, Tony Smith, the family payments that started to come to the fore over the past couple of weeks?
Well, look, as I said before, look, it's one poll. I think the essential poll last evening on Sky.
You don't think it's the start of a trend? Because the last two polls have shown improvement for Labor.
My point, Tony Abbott's point, the focus of everyone in the coalition party room is to work as hard as we can, every day, every week, every month. That's our focus. It doesn't alter with the polls, Dave. Now, polls are for commentators, but as Greg Hunt pointed out this morning, I mean, if Labor want to focus on that, it is a Whitlam-style result repeated on election day, whereas the essential poll last night is a worse than Whitlam-style result. Now, if they want to focus on that, that's fine. Our focus is to work as hard as we can to hold the government to account and to articulate a positive vision and a positive alternative, and that's what we're focused on. They are advertising. There's so-called carbon tax ads that don't mention the carbon tax. As I said, Julia Gillard was away for a few days. Maybe that's had an impact. I don't think it's a long-term strategy. I don't think she can stay out of the country permanently.
Is it just buying votes, Stephen Jones?
It's clear what the coalition party are going to be focusing on, but I can tell you every single Labor Party member is going to be going back to their electorates. They're going to be saying this. We are delivering tax cuts on the 1st of July. Nobody earning under $18,500 will be paying tax. We're delivering pension increases. We're assisting households through the school kids bonus and increases in family tax benefits. That's what Labor's doing, and Smithy's party wants to take them off.
Will you be saying you're also delivering a carbon tax?
Absolutely.
On the 1st of July?
We are putting in place a system to put a price on carbon. We're doing that because it is the most economically efficient way to reduce carbon emissions. Smithy knows that because he actually knows a bit about economics, unlike his leader. He's not bored by it. He knows that it's the most economically efficient way to deal with carbon emissions, and that's why we're doing it.
I want to ask one more question about the news poll today. It was hardly a good poll for Tony Abbott personally. The most common question I get from friends who don't work in this place is, why isn't Malcolm Turnbull...
Lucky you. You've got friends that don't work in this place. You're an unusual journalist.
Why isn't Malcolm Turnbull leader? That's what people outside of this place say to me. Why isn't he leader? What's your response to that?
Well, because the party room made a decision back in 2009. That's the simple answer. Look, when you're opposition leader, you're holding the government to account. On the preferred Prime Minister stakes, this has bounced around all year. But if you look back historically, I mean, John Howard, when he was opposition leader, I don't think was ever preferred Prime Minister over Paul Keating. And he went on to be not only a great Prime Minister, but once he was there, was preferred Prime Minister by a long way. Now, Tony Abbott is doing a great job holding the government to account. out in the, I'm glad to hear that Jonesy's door knocking, so he's obviously not the Labor MP that's too scared to knock on the doors for risk of being berated. But look, out there in the electorate, sure, they're frustrated with what is a negative government. Now, we can't help the fact that the government keeps making bad decision after bad decision. I mean, we can't drop
this place is coming from you guys.
I better get a response from Stephen Jones before I move on.
Look, negativity solely coming from this side. We're out there every day focusing on the real issues, which is creating jobs. Over 800,000 of them created since we've been in government, and an unemployment rate with a 4 in front of it. Unprecedented.
Let's go to jobs now. And do you support this caucus decision today to set up this subcommittee to ensure that Australians are put first when it comes to mining projects? Is that enough to guarantee?
David, you would have to have rocks in your head not to support a proposal which is going to see the creation of 8,000 jobs in Australia over the next few years. And that's what the agreement does. It creates 8,000 jobs, at least 6,000 of them for Australians, and then the 1,700 that are subject of the Enterprise Migration Agreement are only where we cannot find workers in Australia to fill those jobs. You'd have to have rocks in your head. Although I see Bob Catter's against it. You'd have to have rocks in your head not to support it. The proposal that we put through caucus this morning is about ensuring it is properly scrutinised and that what is promised is actually delivered.
So Doug Cameron, Kelvin Thompson, are you saying they've got rocks in their head? Or
no, absolutely not. I'm saying the proposal that went through caucus this morning is about ensuring what is promised is actually delivered, particularly when it comes to the employment arrangements, and particularly when it comes to ensuring that we are doing everything we can to ensure that Australians get a fair crack at those jobs before anybody else.
Tony Smith, the Coalition generally supports this policy, claiming that they sort of came up with it in the first place. Do you have any concerns, though, with where we are at the moment, the possibility and likelihood perhaps that more of these type of agreements will be brought to Australia?
Well, Stephen just articulated what the principles are. The Minister articulated that yesterday, that if Australians can't be found for a certain number of jobs, on that condition, visas can be granted. Now, what he articulated was not clear to the Prime Minister, obviously. And this is the problem. At every turn, there's chaos. Now, the Minister in Parliament yesterday was very clear that the Prime Minister's office was briefed early last week. Now, the Prime Minister can't have it both ways. Either she doesn't know what's going on, or she's being dishonest, or both. But what is interesting is that when she met with those union leaders, clearly the impression they got was that she knew nothing about it. This was all Chris Bowen. And then this is followed up today. This committee you're talking about, David, this is a committee to watch Chris Bowen. That's what it is. It's a CWCB. It's a committee to watch Chris Bowen.
Can I just take you up on that, Smithy?
No, but Josie, what you pointed out...
What you're disappointed about, mate, is that we've actually done something to reform the 457 process, because when you guys were in government, it was a visa shop, mate. Well, anybody who stuck their hand up and said that I need a worker and I don't want to pay Australian rates of pay could get one of these 457s. You were turning them out like a rodeo machine.
Just on the process, on the process, though, Stephen Jones, should this have gone to the party room first? Should this have gone to the party room last week or this week, and then the decision announced in total, and that would have avoided all this messiness that we've seen over the past
Hindsight's
week.
Always a wonderful thing, David. In politics, there's some things and there's some information that's come to light over the last couple of days that I'm sure every backbencher would have liked to have had in their back pocket as we faced the discussion at the end of the last week. But in politics, as in business, you pay on results. 8,000 jobs being created. We've got a proposal that is going to be bankable and up and running and creating jobs for Australians and wealth for the country, and that's got to be a good thing.
Process, you talk about hindsight. This is a matter that comes up again and again and again as something that this Labor government can't do right.
Oh, look, I disagree with you there. I'll tell you the things we are getting right, and that's the economic fundamentals, mate. We are creating jobs, good quality jobs. We are ensuring that as we go through the mining boom, we're spreading the wealth around the economy, against the wishes of Smithy's party here, because they'd rather give a tax cut to the big end of town than to ordinary Australian workers. And I think that's what matters at the end of the day.
Well, why was this so confusing? I mean, you know a bit about how the government works. It is inconceivable that the Minister for Immigration could go to the press club, make an announcement that the Resources Minister could be in Perth making an announcement without everyone in the government being in the know. The Acting Prime Minister, Wayne Swan, there's interdepartmental committees. This thing has been, in contemplation for a long period of time. And then for the Prime Minister to say to these union leaders, don't blame me, blame Chris Bowen. I mean, I'm only the Prime Minister. How would I know what's going on? I mean, this wasn't some invention by the media. And at every step, there's chaos, and the default position is dishonesty and dissembling. Okay. That's the problem, and the Australian public see it.
Okay, look, I want to move on now to the Fair Work Australia matter, and today the Coalition has released this email from Doug Williams, who was one of the investigators in the initial investigation into Fair Work Australia. This was back in 2009 that this email was sent, and I'll just read a touch of it here. It talks about a referral to authorities, for example the police, and then he says or recommends that this can occur on the strength of discoveries from inquiries which do not require further investigation. So this is a recommendation that it could go to the police and that further investigation wasn't really needed. Now at that point we know that the new Fair Work Australia body essentially didn't refer it to the police and then set up a new investigation that lasted 3 years. Now the opposition says this is a smoking gun of cover-up. What's your response to that, Stephen Jones?
Look, I haven't seen the material that you're referring to. What I know is that an investigation, a thorough investigation, has occurred. A report that you couldn't jump over has been tabled. As a consequence of that, the DPP and other prosecutory authorities are looking at it. My view and my response to that is Parliament should back off, respect the Constitution and ensure that the courts and the prosecuting authorities do their job, because it's not our job to be out there prosecuting people. We make the laws, we hand it over to other bodies to implement those laws.
Can you think of any reason that Fair Work Australia would not refer it to police on this recommendation?
Like I said, I haven't seen the material that you're referring to, David, but it's my very strong view that we leave these things to the proper authorities.
Tony Smith, I'll get you to respond to that, but also Eric Abetz this morning claiming that this was a smoking gun. There's no real solid evidence that the government was in any way involved in pressuring Fair Work Australia to make this decision.
Eric Abetz was dead right. I mean, what's been revealed, I saw the press conference. You've just had the part of the answer on notice and what was released under FOI read to you. Almost 3 years ago, Fair Work Australia, when they were created, were given this clear advice that David ran through. I won't run through it again. Questions about this were asked in February by Senator Abetz, and the answers delivered last evening only after officials from Fair Work Australia had completed their evidence. These answers, as you know, they're all cleared by ministers' offices. Again, default position is trickery and dissembling. And Eric Abetz is quite right. The Senate should be, that Senate Estimates Committee should be calling back Fair Work Australia. It is obvious that these answers were only submitted to prevent, after Fair Work Australia had completed their evidence, just let me finish, so they couldn't be asked the sort of questions David's now asking. Now, Labor senators have got a choice. This is about the administration of Fair Work Australia. It's about documentary evidence that 3 years ago they were advised by the Industrial Registrar to refer matters to the police forthwith. Okay. Now, Labor senators have a choice. They can vote for openness to bring back Fair Work Australia, or they can vote for concealment. And I'm pretty sure what they'll do if they're given the chance.
So should Fair Work Australia be brought back to answer these?
Well, I think there are some questions that need to be answered. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But the nub of the issue is this. Does the government, and does Craig Thompson himself think that the Fair Work Australia should have conducted its inquiries a lot quicker than it did? I think everybody has stood up and said that. The 3 years was a bit of a joke. To have such a long-running investigation into this affair has served nobody's interests, and that it should have occurred a lot more quickly. So the issue at the heart of it, I think everyone is in heated agreement on. Fair Work Australia took far too long to investigate this matter.
And just one final question to you, Stephen Jones. The reputation of Fair Work Australia, we're almost out of time, but the President wants the judiciary and the administration arms split up because he feels the judicial arm has been badly damaged by all of this. Do you think there needs to be a shake-up of Fair Work Australia?
Well, of course, the President of Fair Work Australia's opinions on these things will be given appropriate weight, but the Minister has commissioned a review into the operations of Fair Work Australia and the Act. I understand it's due to report in a few weeks' time, so I think before jumping in and taking one person's recommendations out of context, I think we should look at the whole report and make a decision on that basis.
Okay. Stephen Jones, Tony Smith, thanks very much for your insight on Lunchtime Agenda. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more in a moment.